Yeah.
So the question for me is, does that mean now, obviously, they lose a third of the business, as it seems, but what you're suggesting is that Apple will eventually do everything themselves. So would your base case be that basically Dialog will lose the entire Apple business in the not too distant future, or would you see a case where Apple retains them as a sort of an alternative source supplier for the foreseeable future?
Yeah. So, typically in the industry, you always do multi-sourcing. Multi-sourcing is the norm in general because you don't want, because the demand and supply fluctuate a lot, and you would want to have, enough of outsourcing. But having said that, if you start designing your internal, and you basically you control the supply chain not at the vendor level, but you can control supply chain at a manufacturing level, right? Because your own chip, like for example, A11 chips is all they're own their own demand supply chain, so they don't care about external vendors. So eventually, if Apple or any silicon manufacturer decides to go internal and build their own capability, the idea usually is that you want to build your own roadmap for the future that can supply, most of your designs or all of your designs. And we have seen a lot of these have pan out in the cellular side as well, right? The cellular side, a lot of outsourcing and modems were being bought, and then people said, okay, we can slowly start thinking about building the modems internally and figuring out our own modem solutions, entire solutions. So from a standpoint, I would say that in the short term, it's not because of the design complexity as well as sort of the risk involved. There's a yearly refresh cycle on iPhones, so they cannot screw up the refresh cycle or the design cycles while they're designing their own internal chips. So they will have to retain, from an external design, make sure, there's no slippages in there. Till they're completely ready to launch the first iPhone, make sure that those designs are successful, and then they will slowly scale to the other iPhone designs. That's typically what will happen, right? And normally the best place might be to start with higher end phones. You can start either way. If the higher end phones have luxury of using better quality components, they can actually do better tolerances and efficiencies in a much more expensive phone because they are not restricted by what they can use. So they'll start there, and then they will cost optimize the design for other lower end phones, that they have to launch. Right. So that is typically the way you would normally do it. So that's what I would assume Apple is trying to at least do, because they did that in the graphics side. So that's a similar approach that they can definitely do in this side as well, once they decide to decide. And I think the smartphone is definitely a start, but the more power hungry devices that happen to be their watches. And, of course, there's rumors that Apple is working on their AR headset as well, and that is going to be another bigger challenge in terms of building a completely new power solution for that one. And so they're building a sourcing side of that as well. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. But in terms of in terms of Dialog's situation now, obviously they're losing. Well, they have these 600 plus engineers, what you said. And they're losing a lot of revenues now. If you were the manager of that division of Dialog, what would you do? Yeah. Is there a way you can develop a new product that these engineers could work on? Could you turn around and say, hey, Samsung, by the way, I have these great capabilities. Do you need these PIMICs that I can develop? Or would you rather go out and try to, find a buyer for this business, somebody that could take advantage of the ability to acquire a bunch of engineers that have been working on this highly specialized PIMIC in the past?
Yeah, so power management is a very versatile and necessary chip and thing for every device that you would normally do, right? So Apple happens to be the biggest design, but I think the Android ecosystem is much more bigger and vaster, even though they are much more cost constrained than the iPhone